to put him there, right? And he's there. So it's answerable to us. It's our job to oversight whatever he's doing.
Right.
In line with the Section 14 of the 1999 Constitution as amended.
I want to push you on something else, still on this issue of fuel subsidy removal and the fallouts of the policy. The president has said that monies realized from this removal will be channeled into two key areas. He mentioned health, education, and infrastructure. We all know how fundamental these areas are to any country that wishes to develop. Do you think that's far-reaching enough? Is that specific enough? Because one would have thought there are specifics as to we're going to do this bridge, build a bridge, do this. An umbrella statement, like a sweeping statement with no specifics?
It may sound like a sweeping statement. They are elective public officers accountable, including the president. Now they say we've saved about 400 billion, which is very fine. So if I save 400 billion within this short time, that means, according to the projection of the World Bank, we'll be saving about 11 trillion or so, if I'm very correct. So now with that kind of money saved, then we should not be having problem with infrastructural development. When it comes to infrastructural development, if this money is is going to be channeled to infrastructural development, then the citizens need to wake up to monitor how this infrastructure is going to happen. So it's not just enough for the president to tell us that we are going to use it to fix road. Which road are you talking about here?
True.
And by the time you release the list of the roads that are being are going to be fixed, then the next question is, when is it going to be fixed? Who is it going to be awarded
So
to?
there has to be timeline for projects.
Exactly. What is the timeline? How much is released? And the citizens should focus on tracking all these things from the beginning to the end of the whole thing. Talking of health, the same thing goes for health. So now, if the infrastructure are fixed, I think to a very large extent it will help in ameliorating the effect of the fuel subsidy, because Nigeria is well known for bad roads. Across the country, there's no part of the country that you will not see bad roads. Is it Lagos, Ibadan expressway that has not been fixed, or is it the Benin or the expressway that is a swimming pool at the center of the road, or is it Enugu-Onitsha expressway, or is it Port Harcourt? We have plenty of them, or East-West Road. So we should be looking at the government telling us exactly where they are channeling this money, who are they giving this money, when is it going to happen, how much has been released. All these things need to be put in the table, because we deserve transparency and explanation of what they are doing with our money, because it's our money that we are talking about here.
Talking about money, I mean, you've talked about money, you've talked about transparency and how that we need to track, progress or otherwise. I mean, that's a responsibility you say should be put in front of citizens. We know, for example, about the FOI, the Freedom of Information Act. We have seen agencies, we have seen even media houses, for instance, all right, invoke it where necessary. I can't put a finger on how effective or otherwise that has been, but Nigeria is a place where tracking projects, tracking what a governor, for example, is doing, what a senator is doing, what a local government chairman is doing, or even the president, for example, it's a tall order for most people, even for established, reputable organizations. For example, what are the specific things we must do to be able to track effectively beyond what NGOs are doing? I mean, a lot of NGOs are doing pretty much a lot of work, all right, trying to track. But look at the Abacha loot, for instance. Most Nigerians can't really place a finger on what those monies have been spent on. Do you see the subsidy savings going the same direction?
The subsidy savings will go the same direction if Nigerians permit it to be like that. For instance, just as you mentioned, the Freedom of Information Act that was, signed into law in 2011. Of course, a lot of people have successfully invoked it to obtain transparency. I remember there was a time we had challenges with the Kaduna, Kano expressway. The construction company then, Julius Berger or so, they are not sticking to the engineering plan, and we're able to get the information about it. And of course, we wrote a request for freedom of information to the Ministry of Works. Just the request alone that we wrote, we have not even had meeting with them. They went back there to start doing the writing. So Nigeria have the perception that nothing is working, nobody's going to listen to you and all that. But the question is, have we really, tried? Exactly. Have we really tried? That's number one. Number two is, what is even the level of our knowledge of what is obtained in the contract and all that.
Right.
So we are not paying attention to all this. And the political class are happy. We are not doing that.
Yeah.
So nobody can say, as I said before, these people, they work for us. And they know that after a 4-year tenure, they will come looking for another vote. And of course, whether I like it or not, our electoral process have improved to some extent that they know that they need people's vote to get to power. So I don't think any government in its right sense will be blocking people's access to information. So Nigerians are more politically conscious now than what we used to obtain before. So now what people need to do is, at any small cluster, let's say the market association, the youth association in the rural area, women association, men association and all that, they should come together and look at the provisions of the budget of their state, of their local government, of their community, and demand from the councillor to the local government chairman to state house of rep members, the ones in the National Assembly, up to the governor, what they are doing with their money. Nobody is going to kill you for that.
Right.
The more you make the pressure, you put the pressure, the more government will have no other choice than to respond to your demand.
I'm going to ask you this lastly on this first of the subsidy issue before we talk about a few other things. We've heard government after government, especially during the Buhari administration, and even now that we have Bola Ahmed Tinubu at the helms, talk about how the fuel subsidy regime was a criminal enterprise. You and I know for a fact that you can't have crime without having criminals. So the question is, if it had been the entire time a criminal enterprise, is it not natural to believe that there are criminals running the enterprise? So what is the law doing, or what are the authorities doing about those criminals, as it were? Because if you have committed a crime, the long arm of the law, as we know, it ought to catch up. Is that something we're looking at, or we're saying, let the past go with the past, let's face the future?
Well, when we look at the criminal we're talking about now, we're not talking of petty pickpocket criminals. They are big-time mafia dons, and these are the strong men that are controlling the institution we have in the country. Part of the challenge we have in this country are strong men controlling and weakening our institution. So until Nigerian citizen brings a clash back in making sure that this institution are strengthened, those people will keep on going scot-free. Of course, the fuel cabal, we know them. We know how they bring vessel, collect subsidy and divert it to other countries and all that. So it takes a government that has balls to hold these people accountable and slam them to jail and punish them according to the law. But the thing is, are we going to see that happening? Time will tell. But I think they need to be punished for what they did. But the number one punishment is already the removal of this fuel subsidy. And the other way government can further punish them is to ensure that we don't just accumulate proceeds of fuel subsidy. We should be able to grant license to modular refineries. I think the previous administration started that initiative. I don't know where it's hanging now. In a place like Edo State, they made a move to have a modular refinery, to have other attempt to have modular refineries in the Niger Delta. All the boys that are doing illegal bunkering and refining and all that, these guys, they can be, brought to the table and be empowered to set up a modular refinery.
Just to add to that, we hear that the space, the oil and gas space has been liberalized now in such a way that people can get licensed to float their own modular refineries. How's that coming?
Floating modular refinery is not something you carry out with a chicken change, and that's where government should come in.
It's capital intensive.
It's capital intensive, so we should be looking at government granting license to as many of them as possible, making funds available to them, and of course giving them tax holiday in the first 3-4 years of their operation before they can now start recouping their investment. Because if you like it or not, Nigeria is heavily dependent on petroleum. Now, the power sector is very poor. We've not been able to generate any significant power to fund our industry or to power our industry. So most people rely on diesel fuel, rely on petrol, like the artisanal traders and artisans. They rely on fuel, and this fuel has gone up. And so that will increase the prices of their services. Some of them will even pack up, and that will be increasing the number of poor people we have. So we need to be very mindful of all these things. So money saved from here should be encouraged to, support those that have modular refinery, because Dangote refinery will not be able to provide all the fuel needs that we are looking at in Nigeria. So such support needs to be given to all these people to ensure that as the year goes by, we'll have enough supply and we'll be able to, supply to other countries.
Okay, I've been talking with James Ugochukwu here. He's a good governance advocate as well as election monitor. We're just going to take a quick break. We have one more issue we must look at before we're done with the program this morning. Do stay with us. Welcome to Global Morning here on.
Welcome to the AM News.
The death toll from flooding.
Most time our politicians just bring in policies too, for sure.
Incidentally, we have several more stories.
The legislature was carefully crafted to
22.2% inflation rates as of April this year. What does that say about where we are as a country?
I think Nigeria has resorted to being resilient.
The National Assembly is something that must be gotten right.
Before you call a police station, before they even leave, they'll take permission from.
I don't think there's really anything on ground to improve.
The struggle with the ASU strike.
The Minister of Education volunteered and said, give me 2 weeks.
It was a lie. The president never gave me any deadline.
We rush straight now to quickly look at the issue of appointment of ministers for the Tinubu government. Recall that in 2015, when former President Muhammadu Buhari, I should say, had been sworn in to lead the country for another 4 years, he didn't have ministers in place. You can also say he didn't have a cabinet in place until November that year, which was 6 months down the line. This is the second month of this government. No ministers yet. Some people say, well, President Tinubu is probably taking his time. He wants to get the right hands to do the job. As we say, he wants to get square pegs in square holes, round pegs in round holes, just to cross his T's and dot his I's and all of that. But I'm just going to ask you this, James. Do you think Nigerians should be apprehensive? Is it too early to say we must have ministers in place?
I think we should have had ministers since yesterday. Because you remember when the current South African president, Cyril Ramaphosa, took over in less than 72 hours or 90 hours, already constituted his cabinet. So, but in this part of the world, or in this country, we have this client patronage system of running the government. So you served me, look, I need to compensate you for the good service you've done and all that. So that's what is actually delaying the appointment of ministers. Sorry, had it that a lot of lobbyists are following the president. A lot of people want to get his attention to the point that serious security training security screening here at the villa, trying to restrict a lot of people because of the lobbying and all that. But of course, we are hoping that in line with the current amendment of the Constitution that stipulate that ministerials and commissioners' lists should be done with, or the appointment should be done with within 60 days in office. I hope that will beat everybody back online to ensure that this is done. And of course, we are believing that as the National Assembly is resuming today, maybe before the end of the week, the president will transmit the list of the ministerial nominees to the National Assembly so that we get the country rolling. Because
incidentally, we need to quickly go on a break shortly so we can continue this conversation. Welcome to Global Morning here on
Welcome to the AM News.
The death toll from flooding.
Most time our politicians just bring in policies too, for sure.
Incidentally, we have several more stories.
The legislature was carefully crafted to
22.2% inflation rates as of April this year. What does that say about where we are as a country?
I think Nigeria has resorted to being resilient.
The National Assembly is something that must be gotten right.
Before you call a police station, before they even leave, they'll take permission from
I don't think there's really anything on ground to improve.
the struggle, the ASU strike.
Minister of Education volunteered and said, give me 2 weeks.
It was a lie. The president never gave me any deadline.
Welcome to Global Morning here on
Welcome to the AM News.
The death toll from flooding.
Most time our politicians just bring in policies too, for sure.
Incidentally, we have several more stories.
the legislature was carefully crafted to
22.2% inflation rates as of April this year. What does that say about where we are as a country?
I think Nigeria has resorted to being resilient.
The National Assembly is something that must be gotten right.
Before you call a police station, before they even leave, they'll take permission from
I don't think there's really anything on ground to improve.
the struggle, the ASU strike.
Minister of Education volunteered and said, give me 2 weeks.
It was a lie. The president never gave me any deadline.
Welcome to Global Morning here on
Welcome to the AM News.
The death toll from flooding.
Most time our politicians just bring in policies too, for sure.
Incidentally, we have several more stories.
the legislature was carefully crafted to
22.2% inflation rates as of April this year. What does that say about where we are as a country?
I think Nigeria has resorted to being resilient.
The National Assembly is something that must be gotten right.
Before you call a police station, before they even leave, they'll take permission from
I don't think there's really anything on ground to improve.
the struggle, the ASU strike.
Minister of Education volunteered and said, give me 2 weeks.
It was a lie. The president never gave me any deadline.
Thank you, everyone, for staying with us here on Global Morning. So, James, you were making a point a while ago about the client patronage system we operate in Nigeria and how the people have been lobbying the president the entire time.
Yes. So that is what has been obtainable in our system, a situation whereby you put a square peg in a round hole and a round peg in a square hole. And of course, that has always been the problem we have and has resulted in drawing us backward. And of course, we are hoping that the current president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, will stick to what he's known for, which is good head hunting. And I don't think he's going to do something differently now. Of course, story have it that he's looking at, depending on technocrats and career civil servants as his top ministers. So what should be advising him to do is to ensure that should realize and be persuaded with the fact that he inherited a government with huge debt, with a collapsed economy and serious insecurity in the land. So on appointing his ministers, he should look at people that should be able to take care of these issues and not appointing people to as a political compensation because they supported him during his presidency. So we are hoping that he's going to stick to picking technocrats into key positions. There are some key ministries that we don't just put anybody there. It requires experienced people, it requires people that are transparent, it requires people that are ready to work, it requires people that has track record of performance in their previous field, either in private sector or public sector, to man. Then other ones, he can use it as a political compensation. So we are hoping that as he send the ministerial list to the National Assembly, it's going to be a list of credible Nigerians and people that are able to perform and take this country forward. Because we already lost the first 6 months of the year, and we need to really get the country back in shape by hitting the ground running.
Okay, having said that, I need to ask you about these, because much as we have not seen the list that the president will present to the Senate for ministerial appointments, one thing we do know for a fact today is some persons are already picking holes in the few appointments, about 8 of them in total, that the president has made so far. One in particular is Malam Nuhu Ribadu. This is a gentleman who comes with wealth of policing experience. And then, of course, on top of all that, he's not only a former chairman of the EFCC, he's the pioneer chairman of the EFCC, and he made a mark for himself, made the country proud, you know, in the fight against fraud and all sort of sharp practices in this country. But then there are people now saying, even within the security, defense, and intel space, that, look, hold on a second, this is a former policeman. How does he become the national security advisor? Because they would have thought someone from the armed forces, maybe the army, the navy, or the air force, should have manned that gate, as it were. Do you have any sentiments you'd like to share about that?
I don't think when it comes to security in Nigeria, remember that the police force is the #1 security organization in Nigeria. And of course, before he becomes the EFCC chairman, he was with the police.
Right.
And of course, working as an EFCC chairman has a lot to do with investigation and curbing crime, and of course, doing some counter ops like that. So now, if you look at the national security, of course, we've had ex-defense ministers, ex-people from DSS and all the mining them since the past 8 years, and yet we still don't have any improvement in our security situation. At some point, you know, I called on the President Buhari then to dismiss all the service chiefs. That was the previous one, because they were not able to perform to the expectation of why the former ones were being removed. So I think it's high time we try new ground. He's a security man, whether I like it or not. He mustn't have to be from the DSS or the NIA or ex-military man or something like that. So let's try something new. The young man performed creditably well during his tenure as a pioneer chairman of the EFCC. And of course, he's now a pioneer non-military person in the NSA. So we are hoping that he's going to, you know, still perform creditably well. And of course, he knows the enormous tax before him. The country's security is at all-time low. And of course, the least we expect from him and other service chiefs is to be telling us stories. He should go all out to ensure that they secure the country, because in all these things we are talking about, fuel subsidy removal, ministerial this and all that, if there's no security, none of us are safe. The security was so bad during Buhari administration that even Buhari himself was attacked twice. His brigade of guards were killed and all that. So we shouldn't allow the situation to slip back to that. We should be looking at a Nigeria that everybody will be safe, because whether you're a politician, whether you have the retinue of convoy following you, if these guys are not tamed, they can attack anybody and kill anybody.
I asked you that question because we've seen a bunch of national security advisors in the past. For example, we had late General Owoye Azazi, blessed memory. Yes. Then, of course, we had the likes of Sambo Dasuki, who was seen in very recent history, the likes of Babangana Mongono, retired, and so on and so forth. One would expect naturally that, I mean, as you see on the screen, they're all there right now. One would have expected naturally that a gentleman like Nuhu Ribadu, given his intel background and so on and so forth, would be able or should be able to build on whatever work or achievements this person's had done while they were in office. However, the concern is because he comes from, if you like, more of a policing background, would the armed forces, I mean the authorities in the armed forces, would they cooperate with him?
Well, the thing is, I'm not very conversant with the law establishing the NSA.
Right.
If we restrict the appointments to military paramilitary
I'd like
personnel.
to assume it doesn't, because if it did, the president of all people
Good.
should
So
know.
the president has not violated any law by so doing, and of course, appointing him is a security operative.
Yes, but we're looking at whether or not the armed forces would cooperate with him, because of it's like making a pharmacist commissioner for health in the state, and you know how the doctors feel about that.
Well, in Nigeria, we've seen anybody as a minister of health, and of course, things still work. So we are looking at power here. The power has been given to him by the president, and of course, all the other service chiefs, they take orders from the president as well. And then we are now looking at interagency cooperation among the agencies, which doesn't even exist when we have the so-called military people in power, because we had interactions with them, and you see different departments complaining. DSS will tell you they've done their investigation and they submitted a report about some terrorists and nothing was done about it. The police will say they are carrying. So we are looking at a situation whereby all the interagency bodies will be, coordinated into a common front where they will collaborate, because this is not an ego trip that we should be embarking on. We should be looking at the overall interest of the country, how we can reduce this insecurity. Because as I said earlier, whether just tell me anybody that has not been attacked in this country. Former Chief of Defense Staff, Alex Bade, was shot in his farm, a whole former Chief of Defense Staff. So nobody is safe. So what we should be looking at here is how do we rescue this country from this insecurity stranglehold, not who is in power. Even if the person is not that very experienced, yes, if you are in the team, you should be able to guide him and give him the support he needs to do. He needs for him to perform very well. So that's what we should be looking at here. So we don't want to assume or presume that they are not going to support them. We should have the positive hope that they are going to work in harmony and, of course, work towards resolving these insecurity issues we have in the country.
Nigerians were particularly bothered about a couple of ministers and the immediate past administration, of course, which was led by former President Muhammadu Buhari. For instance, economy, finance, basically, all right? Then, of course, education. Those two ministries, then labor, if you want to, Ministry of Labor and Employment. So those three ministers had controversies around the kind of work they did, the impact they made. People questioned the propriety of President Muhammadu Buhari appointing those people to head those ministries. For example, people have said, look, Governor of Anambra State, former Senator Chris Ngige, didn't do an excellent work with negotiations with the organized labor, especially as it touches the issues of ASU. The constant strikes and so on and so forth. And then the area of the economy, there are those who also point to the immediate past Minister of Finance saying, look, she wasn't innovative enough with the way she ran the country's economy, whether it was in the area of budgeting or planning. All right, then you go to education. Madam Adamu Adamu, all right, also had questions, or if you like, question marks over the competence and the capacity that he brought to office as Minister of Education. What lessons do you think, as you sit here in this studio, we can take away from those developments so we can get a better team for this president?
This current administration, they made a strong promise during their campaign that they are going to provide millions of jobs. Good. For you to provide millions of jobs, you should be mindful of the kind of person you appoint as the labor minister. The person has to be a very innovative somebody. The person has to be somebody that has experience in the labor industry. The person should be able to understand how to work with the Nigerian Labour Congress and other labor unions. And of course, the person should have the willingness, to perform his duty, not the kind that you have that they don't even care what is happening. Understand? Then when it comes to economy, the same thing, because you cannot provide job without a thriving economy. So shouldn't be having the kind of Minister of Finance that will be doling out money without any proper accountability of how that money is being used. No government throws money to citizens just to solve economic problem. We provide a platform for the citizens to thrive in their enterprise. That is the most important thing we should be looking at. So Minister of Finance, Minister of Budget and National Planning and all that should be people that are sound, technocrat that understand how this thing works in the larger society. People that have maybe experience in other climes that you can bring in. We have a lot of them. Have a lot of them in other parts of the world. Nigerians that have been outsourced to other countries, solving other countries' problems while we are suffering. So we are hoping that the president will not just look at his political allies and pick anybody for political compensation. Should be looking at bringing people that will be able to solve the problem. Because in the economy now, the Nigerian economy is in shambles. According to World Bank reports that they released some couple of weeks back now, because of this fuel subsidy removal now, if government did not caution the effect, about 7.1 million people will be entering the poverty net by December this year. So if you add that to 133 million of multi-dimensional poverty, that's about 200 million people. So more than half of Nigerians are now, almost all Nigerians are now poor. So these are the things that
the right hands to get the job done, at least in 4 years or 8 years, as the case may be. But there are also those now saying that from the body language, because in Nigeria we always talk about body language of the president, he's not likely going to succumb to pressure from within his party because he has his eye on the ball, he wants to get the job done. But then there's the concern around how he would be treated by his party and how that may ultimately become a distraction for him and, if you like, dissipate his energy that he needs to deploy to doing the job. You want to talk to us about that for a minute?
I think from what we've heard now, is looking at engaging technocrats, one, then career civil servants, then politicians as the last option. And of course, is eyeing people from other political parties that he can bring in order to form a government of national unity and all that. So the president does not strike me like somebody that can be pushed around when he's making his decision. And of course, that does not imply that he will not listen to sound suggestion. Because this is what is obtainable in other parts of the world. The president is allowed to make his decision, you understand? Ruling party, the same thing. Yes, a memorable one in the memories of Nigerians. Nigerians will wait for them in the polls come 2027.
I think that's a fine place to leave it. James Ugochukwu, election analyst and group governance advocate, also executive director, African Center for Entrepreneurship and Information Development. We can't thank you enough for spending a part of your morning with us here on the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
That's what we're leaving it, everyone. Thank you for being with us here on Global Morning. I'm Muya Agmofwebe saying thanking you. I thank you this morning for joining us here, and I say thank you again on behalf of the entire team here at Global Television. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye. Several more stories.
The legislature was carefully crafted to
22.2% inflation rates as of April this year. What does that say about where we are as a country?
I think Nigeria has resorted to being resilient.
The National Assembly is something that must be gotten right.
Before you call a police station, before they even leave, they'll take permission from
I don't think there's really anything on ground to improve.
We struggled, we asked to strike.
The Minister of Education volunteered and said, give me 2 weeks.
It was a lie. The president never gave me any deadline.
Global Television, building the nation.